COVID PSYOP was definitely made possible by the use of sophisticated propaganda and behavior modification techniques, and we're going to explore two areas where these were deployed. Firstly, in the groupthink compliance of the public. Secondly, with the nurses and doctors who blindly obeyed authority and administered harmful ventilators on patients categorized as COVID cases. So, how was any of this possible? How did the architects of this global hoax manage to trick people into acting in ways they normally wouldn't? Matthias Desmet has talked about mass formation, and I think this theory is certainly part of it. But there's more examples that can help us to gain an insight into how people can be put into an almost trance-like state of obedience. I'm going to discuss 3 psychological and social experiments that show us how human beings can be conditioned into either groupthink or blind obedience to authority, including taking part in unethical and immoral behavior. The first experiment seems harmless enough and kind of seems funny at first, but after a while you'll find it quite disturbing actually. This is from a show called Brain Games.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group.
So without questioning, she starts standing up with everyone else every time there's a beep. Pure groupthink behavior. This is an example of how a person switches off their judgment and critical thinking and just goes along with the crowd in order to fit in. Then, one by one, the people in the waiting room filter out, and she's the only one left. Every time the beep goes off, she continues to stand up, even when the group is gone. Then, when a new person arrives who doesn't know the rules, he eventually starts copying her, and the cycle of conformity begins once again, and a social norm is formed for a new group. This kind of psychology could be seen in how most people in our society accepted all of the COVID regulations, from social distancing, hand sanitizing, mask wearing, elbow bumps, refusing to shake hands, and standing on arrows and circles in supermarkets and shopping centres, under significant pressure and repeated exposure and fear of social ostracization. The individual succumbs to the collective. The Ash conformity experiments give us another insight into this phenomenon. These were directed by Solomon Ash in the 1950s.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. As you can see here, I have a number of cards, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. All right, we'll proceed in this order. You'll give your answer.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the 5th person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3.
But on the 3rd trial, something happens.
2, 2, 2, 2, 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence. Ash found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
1. 1.
They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me.
1.
This subject's yielding is based on a distortion of his judgment. He genuinely believes that the group is correct.
1. 1. 1. 2. 1. 2. 2. 2.
I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves?
2.
In this case, the subject knows he is right, but goes along to avoid the discomfort of disagreeing with the group. Here, the distortion is at the level of his response.
2. 2. 2. 2.
I can think of a few examples of this when it comes to COVID. One such example that comes to mind is the data on how COVID deaths were classified. We know that the vast majority of people classified as COVID deaths had died from other things and were put down as died with COVID. When we remove all of the cases of people who died with COVID, the number of people who died directly from COVID is very small indeed, to the point where it appears that COVID is not killing people any more than an average seasonal influenza would.
Sometimes we go along with a group because what they say convinces us they are right. This is called informational conformity. But sometimes we conform because we are apprehensive that the group will disapprove if we are deviant. This is called normative conformity.
You can literally sit down with someone and break down the numbers on a piece of paper, explaining that there is no statistical evidence of a pandemic when we interrogate the COVID death figures, and yet they will still refuse to believe the actual facts that are right in front of their eyes, just like the person who goes along with the group and deliberately calls out the wrong numbered line in the ASH experiment. You can literally show a person the official government data on all-cause mortality for 2020, which indicates no discernible increase in average deaths when compared to 2019 or 2018, but they will still believe that there was a pandemic because the media and authorities tell them so, despite the fact that they don't know anyone who's died from it. They aren't witnessing a massive increase in death in their own lives when it comes to friends, family, work colleagues, associates, neighbours, etc. They're not seeing loads of dead bodies littering the streets, but they're acting as if there's a deadly pandemic, and so is everyone else, so it becomes real to them. People literally refuse to believe the evidence you present to them. I'll move on now to talk about the Milgram experiment, conducted by Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram. They began in 1961.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where?
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
Can't
here.
stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man today. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next with slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
2/3 of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering with less voltage. Can't you check in to see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
The reason I bring this up is because I think this gives us another insight into how people can outsource moral authority. This reminds me of what happened in hospitals during COVID, where health authorities issued hospitals with a new policy for dealing with COVID cases. For patients believed to have COVID, they were placed on ventilators and given remdesivir. This was a deadly protocol that led to an enormous amount of avoidable deaths. They should have been given treatments such as hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin. It's not that nurses and doctors intentionally sought to harm or even kill patients. They simply placed their trust in an authority above them and followed the new procedures of their job. If a patient died from this dangerous protocol, the patient was put down as a COVID death, and the protocol itself was not questioned. This blind obedience to authority can also be seen in how the general public complied with the face mask mandates. If a person is wearing a mask because they believe it will keep them safe from a virus, why do they need me to wear one? If their mask works, then why should they be bothered if there isn't one on my face? The reality is, when most people are challenged about this, they mostly just wilt and respond with, "It's the rules." They fall back on the power of the authority that motivates them. It's a similar story with a vaccine. If it works, why do the vaccinated have to worry about the unvaccinated? The truth is, the public went along with masks and vaccines and vaccine passports for two reasons. Because of group dynamics and the desire to go along with the crowd, and because the authority figures in their lives of the government, media, and the so-called health experts encouraged them to do so.